Okay, so today I want to show you guys this book I had laying around. This is The Whole Internet, The Next Generation. And this book was actually made more than 20 years ago. If you look at a lot of the chapters in this book, you'll really see that a lot of what's in this book is still pretty relevant to this day. Like, even though it's 20 years old, the internet really hasn't changed much. For like the average user of the internet, I think this book is really useful. It really has a lot to say in terms of you just using like the fundamental tools on the internet, not any of the fun like social media or like video game kind of things. Okay, let's actually take a look at it. So this is a nice page. I see here it says $4.99. I guess that this is like a used copy, so secondhand copy was like $5. And yeah, this is a nice illustration here on the page. So as you can see here, this was printed October 1999, the first edition. And yeah, it really shows how old this book is, but it looks pretty nice still. It's not very worn. I guess the person who owned it didn't really use it a lot. Okay, so what do we learn here? What this book is about, the history of the internet. And I think an interesting thing here is the email and news section. So this really tells you how people would find news and look at emails back in 1999. Here's a section here explaining how to use email, how to set up free accounts. So back then they had free accounts also. That's pretty nice. Here's a section on the web browser. Here's a section about privacy and securities. Buying and selling is a fairly sizable portion of this book, and I think that a lot of people were really interested in buying and selling on the net because that was like a really new thing that people could do. Banking and finance, I mean, not exactly my cup of tea, but alright. Online games, I guess there was some games back then you could play online. Creating new web pages. This is for the techies out there, you know, the coders, the people who actually know how to code. Let's see. Esoteric Emerging Technologies, streaming, high quality audio with MP3. Yep, that's a very esoteric technology, I guess. Push technologies, futures. Okay, I think I'll look into this just for the novelty of it. Connection strategies, ground rules, gathering baseline information, the battle plan. So I guess the connection strategies is about your ISP. So this is dealing with the ISP and how the ISP lets you on the net. Searching and finding. This is a chapter that may actually give you some insights on how to look for things on the net. And I think the skill of looking for information is actually timeless. So there are just like a couple of ground truths to being able to find information online. Can't really be outdated. Downloading and installing files. Okay. Resource catalog, best of the web. So I'm going to assume that most of the websites listed here are going to be offline by this point, but we'll see. Buying stuff, commercial resources, selling stuff, brokerage companies. Appendix and the previous generation. I guess that's just the appendix, so not that important. So here's the email primer. It really goes through a lot of how people need to understand what email is. Now, take, for example, that this is when email was first coming out and people didn't really understand what email was. People were just coming online. And yeah, this is like a lot of really good information that I think even today, if you give something like this to someone today, that would actually help them out because most people don't really use email other than just like checking what comes in. So for example, a lot of younger people don't really understand what a carbon copy is. So it really gives you a really nice way to understand what email is without really having to ask people, you know, some obvious questions. Here are some of the acronyms that became really commonplace. So BRB, we know what BRB is. By the way, GMTA, great minds think alike. I guess that kind of fell out of favor. I don't really see people saying that. IMHO, in my humble opinion, I guess we kind of see that too. IMO, we see that. This one fell out of favor. OTF, on the floor laughing. Okay. OMG, TTFN, Tata for now. So yeah, like it's really interesting that they try to even inject a lot of the culture of the internet into the book. Here's a couple of smileys. So smile, frown, wink, straight face, and surprise. So I guess this part of the book is really outdated because email on the Palm Pilot, I don't think these things even come out anymore. But I guess it's just a part of the book that you can read just to know how this kind of thing worked. Mailing list basics. This is actually pretty nice because there are still a lot of mailing lists online. And if you can join one, it's actually really nice to join a mailing list because they have a lot of interesting discussions on mailing lists that you don't really find on forums, especially nowadays, now that it's mostly just Twitter, just inane stuff on Twitter or like on Reddit. Here's a section on Usenet, explains basically what Usenet is, explains how to use Usenet. So it gives you a bunch of groups that you can join on Usenet: business, computing, alternative news groups, talk, SOC, sci, topics relating to science, topics relating to society and social life, and so on. And it gives you a bunch of news readers that you can look up. I'm gonna guess that most of these news readers are outdated. So here's another one. It tells people how to set up their INI files. So if they want to do some configurations in their software, they can just send an INI file for their mail reader, and this will basically set things up. And it's really nice that this book isn't like for techies, but it's kind of like telling people how to do stuff that you wouldn't really see. The expectations of people were a lot higher back then than they are now in terms of using technology. So here we have a section that explains to people how to get free email accounts. And here are some of the sites that people could go to sign up for a free email. So here's Bigfoot, which is bigfoot.com. We have GoPlay, we have Hotmail. Hotmail still exists, so this is still relevant. Netscape, we have Rocketmail, and we have NetForward. So this is where you would go to get a free email account back in 1999. So here's some more. Here's Mail City, here's NetAddress, here's Juno, here's 5-Star. Here's them directing people to a lot of instant messaging software. So here's Netscape, AOL Instant Messenger, here's Yahoo ICQ, PAL, InfoSeek. Here's basically, telling you all the resources you would need to go to go and do that. So here's a section which is kind of dated. Like, I think most people know how to use web browsing, but this is just for people who were just getting into it. They didn't understand what a web browser was. So it really goes and explains a lot of the basics of a web browser, where it came from. So this basically shows you a lot of the history of web browsing. It explains, so let's say it came from CERN. I think HTML came from CERN, and it really explains really the background of it, but also goes into a lot of the basics that I think people already know. So like what a homepage is, how to make a homepage, I guess. So here's one that people may find laughable, but here's a section explaining how to enter URLs by hand. Here's a part that I think people are trying to get away from. So frames. I guess people don't use frames anymore in web browsers, but here's just an example of what a frame is. Here's a section explaining how to bookmark your documents. So if you find something nice, you can just bookmark it and go to it later. Here's a section explaining that the web browser is able to, you can find things within the document that you're opening. So, I mean, again, this may seem fairly standard, but people didn't understand how a lot of this stuff worked back then. So here's the section explaining that you can look for text inside of your document that you had open. Here's a section explaining that you can print out the document. So here's a section on cookies. Here's a section on certificates. Again, both of these things are extremely relevant to browsing the internet, and honestly, this is just as valid now as it is back then. So again, like this book, even though it's 20 years old, it hasn't really it didn't really age much. A lot of what's in here is still really applicable to helping people understand how the internet works. So here's a section telling users about alternative browsers. Here's Opera, here's Neoplanet, Mosaic. So these were all of the web browsers that are available back in 1999 that were fairly commonly used. So yeah, just a little history of them. I think the only one that still exists is Opera. But now here's an interesting thing. Here's links, and I think a lot of people who use Linux or like techies they kind of use links because this is a text-based browser that you can open in a terminal. And yeah, I think this one is still. I think this one still exists. You can still download this from like Ubuntu's package manager or whatever. So here's the section on privacy and security. And as you can see here, they focus a lot on cyberstalking and information mining. So there's basically two types of people that you may encounter online. So one of them are people who kind of like follow you around on the internet. And the second category are people who collect your data. So basically, the first section, just people who follow you on the internet. Second section is information mining. So they kind of warn people about giving up information online. I think this bit of advice kind of it's no longer how should I say, people don't want people to follow this advice anymore. But I think cyberstalking, yeah, that's still a thing that people don't want people to do. So this is a nice bit of advice that this book tells people. People can document, archive, and sell anything you tell them. This is basically all you need to know about the internet. Anything you tell people, any information you give them is basically, it's fair game. So, yeah, this is actually a really very relevant to the modern internet or how it developed over time. So here's a good section of the book. Here's a section on privacy. And the first thing they tell people is to use PGP, which is encryption protocol. So basically they tell people, okay, so this is how you make a PGP key. This is how you encrypt a piece of, this is how you encrypt the email. This is how you send your PGP key to other people. And again, this is something that people aren't taught how to do anymore. And I think that's pretty unfortunate. But yeah, like as I said, like this kind of book, it has a lot of value in it that newer books just don't include. So yeah, so as you can see, this is how you send an encrypted email to another person. So here are some email plugins that they recommend for increasing privacy and security. Here's Armor Mail. Here's a PGP Mail. Here's Secure Messenger. I'm guessing most of these things, most of these plugins don't work anymore, but you can check. So here's the section on buying and selling. So I'm gonna guess this is just a section on where to buy and sell things on the internet. I don't think this would be that interesting actually. So here's a section explaining how the shopping cart model works. One-click ordering. I think most people are familiar with this kind of stuff already. The credit card myth. Something about credit cards here. So here are a couple of rules of thumb when it comes to shopping online or trading online. So don't give your credit card number for free merchandise. Determine the seller's refund and return policies. So again, these are very good. These are like a really good checklist to go through to like buy things even today. So if even today you're buying something or selling something, yeah, again, this book's like kind of value packed with this kind of information. So here's a section talking about Jeff Bezos. In 1994, a young investment banker named Jeff Bezos quit a Wall Street job and opened a bookstore. The bookstore is called Amazon and changed the way people bought books. So yeah, I mean, again, this is very, very relevant to today. So it explains how to buy books online, explains all the aspects of purchasing books. I mean, Amazon sells a lot more than books these days. But yeah, basically, This section explains how ISBN search works, how to find books based on their ISBN number. Here's a section on how to buy music, where to buy music. I mean, like a lot of this stuff, it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think that there's really a lot more I can explain here. Here's a section about buying tickets. Here's a section explaining which ticket you want, where the thing is located. I guess I think that they have better systems for that now, but maybe not. I'm not sure. I don't really buy tickets for stuff like that. Here's food purchasing, grocery purchasing online, restaurant delivery, computer equipment. So again, a lot of this stuff is kind of basic. It's not necessarily that interesting to kind of like dive into. You can buy cars online. I mean, who would have thought? So here's a section on doing online banking. So again, I think that this is pretty straightforward. If you know how to do online banking, you know how to do online banking. So here's part of a book. Here's part of the book explaining how to do online trading. So I guess like investing. It gives you it explains what an ask is, what a bid is, what the last sell is. It says the change, the high, the low, the volume, the tick. Yeah, basically just explaining the basics of trading online. And I don't think that I mean it's kind of irrelevant, but at the same time, it's a nice bit of knowledge that this book has that you wouldn't really expect. The basics of trading online. So here's the section about limit buy, limit sell, stop market buy, stop market sell. So again, this is a lot of the things that traders use. So if you use something like Robinhood, you could read this book and it would actually still make sense to you compared to back in the day. So again, like this part of the book aged fairly well because there isn't really a lot of difference between this and let's say something that Robinhood uses or like Bitcoin exchanges use. Trading at a margin, short trading, shorting stocks, monitoring the market online. Again, I mean, this isn't really that interesting to me, but if you're a trader, I mean, even if you're a trader, I think you would already know what this is. So if you're a newbie, you could just like flip through this and kind of get the basics of how you do this kind of stuff. Web-based tax filling. So here's a section on online games. So again, here's a section on online games. This section is mainly about MUDs, so multi-user dungeons. This is basically like this is like an ASCII-based video game kind of deal where you can play with multiple people online. I think this is I think this is around the time when EverQuest came out, or there was like this other multiplayer game online that came out around the same time. Oh, here we go. Game services like Total Entertainment Network, Balnet. So I guess Balnet is still around. MPlayer, creating forums online, etc. So yeah, I guess like the only thing I can recognize here is Balnet because that's what Blizzard's online that's what Blizzard's online services. It's called Balnet, and I guess it still exists. Most of the other stuff in here is it's pretty much gone by this time. So here's basically a screenshot of what a game world looks like. This is a game from 1975. It explains how this thing worked. So I guess one of these characters is the player, the other character is something else, I guess a monster. So it gives you some places where you can find games, I guess. So here's a link to GameSpot. This thing is still up, so I guess GameSpot still survived, and good for them. Civilization, I know that game. So here are a list of games that are available on 10. Let's see. Command & Conquer Red Alert, that's a good game. Command & Conquer. Here's Diablo. Here's Duke Nukem. Here's Panzer General, Quake 2, Shadow Warrior, Warcraft. So again, just a bunch of games, I guess. We still recognize a lot of them because they just survived. But yeah, it's a fairly complete list of things you can do online. So here in this section, they tell you how to find other people to play games with. So here it says you can go on IRC and you can look for people who want to play games on IRC. That's fairly good advice, I think. Here's Quake World. And I think this is a nice chapter because it goes in depth about how to make websites, and it's not really overly technical. And the thing about this book is that it really puts a high respect on the person reading it. So it doesn't try to dumb things down. It literally tells you, okay, this is how you make a website. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. And really, it just shows you, okay, so you can use a template. You can use a text editor to get started. Learn the hypertext markdown language. So here it explains how to create links to other websites. So here are a couple of categories that people should be familiar with when it comes to making websites. So there are lists, there's bullet points, there's definition lists and tables. So here we actually get into a lot of the here's when we actually get to the code. So it begins with the header, what the header is, it explains the title, and here's a little example of what you could write. Here it explains what the body is, it explains what the paragraph headings are, or what paragraphs are, explains what the paragraphs are in HTML. So really, it's really nice because it's not like too overly technical, but at the same time, it gets people like working with the web. So it explains what links are, margins, anchors, etc. So in this section, this explains how to publish to the web, explains how to use the FTP protocol, how to do file management, using relative path names, finding a server. So, I mean, really, it's really nice. It's really nice how they explain all this stuff in just like one book. So basically, in this book, we go from just how to use email to how to write your own websites. And in this part, we're looking at esoteric and emerging technologies. So here's a section about MP3, how to share music online. So the kinds of things that people could do is, so back in the day, I guess MP3 solved the problem of having big audio files. So with MP3, you could actually condense down a lot of the size of audio, so it would be easier to transfer back and forth. Not so much of a problem these days with people actually choosing to use FLAC instead of MP3, but again, this is a book from more than 20 years ago, so it's kind of interesting. It explains a lot of the problems with RIAA, so people weren't really happy about MP3, who controlled the music business back then. Explains how to play MP3s, MP3 players, etc. Here are some sites. I don't think a lot of them are up still. I guess maybe this one is still up. I'm not sure, but you can check that out. So this section is about searching and finding. And here's a little advice about how to find things on the internet. How to find tickets to Carnegie Hall on the web. Practice, practice, practice. And I guess that's a little joke that they put in there. So here are a lot of the search engines which were available back in the day. Here's AOL NetFinder, here's Ask Jeeves, here's Hotbot, InfoSeek, Smart, LookSmart. I don't know what this is. Google? I don't know. Does anyone know the search engine? Anyways, here's Yahoo, here's Search.com. So again, a lot of these search engines, they don't really exist anymore, but again, it's kind of interesting to see. It's kind of interesting to see what was available back in the day, and to have a nice catalog of the search engines available to people back like 20 years ago. So here's a nice section on search operators. So a lot of these things still apply. So for example, the or operator, the not, the near or within. I'm not sure if this still works on Google. So there's the parentheses, this still works. 0 more characters, one character. So a lot of these are kind of copies of. So a lot of these are kind of copies of what was available in regex. But yeah, so this is the kind of stuff that people could use to search on their search engine, and I think a lot of these things are still available. So here's the link extension, here's the link domain. So for example, link domain, O'Reilly.com, URL keyword. So again, like a lot of these things, fairly useful, fairly powerful. I think most people these days don't really use search operators, and even if they do, I think Google kind of punishes you for using too many of them because, I don't know, just I guess it's more taxing on their search engine for you to use search operators than not. So yeah, again, back then, people actually used the net to find information. But yeah, as you can see, a lot of search operators, and this is the kind of stuff that people would actually know how to do. So here's a couple of meta search engines that were available in the day. Number of search engines searched, 13, 5, 6, 25. So here are a couple of plugins that people would use to help them search. So here's Beeline, here's KDS, Concept Explorer. So a lot of these things, again, I'm assuming that they're kind of like outdated or they don't exist anymore. How to find people. So I guess if you want to find someone, there's a bunch of examples of how to find people online. So here are a lot of here's basically the early versions of a lot of the the yellow pages online. So here's literally the yellow pages on the internet if you want that. I mean, it's a fairly simple concept to look up the yellow pages, but at the same time, people may not know that it was available. So it's good to have people just tell you, hey, look, this is available online if you want to look it up. So here's a lot of early mapping software. So I tend to notice there's a lot of Palm Pilot sections here. I don't know why. Maybe Palm Pilot was actually pretty big back in the day. But yeah, it doesn't really exist much anymore. So here is Gopher. That's kind of interesting because people still use Gopher these days. So even though it's kind of like an outdated technology, or if it's a technology that people were starting to move away from, people still use it kind of like a snobbery thing these days. So you kind of see people snobbing about using Gopher or like thinking that Gopher is superior somehow. So here's Archie. This is a thing that search FTP sites, I guess. Here's a screenshot of what a Gopher menu looks like. Here's a section about downloading and installing files. Again, this isn't that interesting. I don't think people even download files anymore. Everything's online at this point. So in this section, they tell you about the best things on the web. So here are a lot of the... So in this section, they tell you a lot of the good websites online that you can go to just check it out, I guess. So, okay, let's see. So, yeah, I mean, I checked some of these sites out, and a lot of them are still online, actually. So if you want, here's the... I'm not sure if these things are still online, but again, you can check it out if you want. So yeah, there's a lot of things here. I mean, you can just go through all of these things and look them up. But again, you know, if you don't really have a lot of time on your hands, it's kind of time consuming to go through all of these things. So here's actually something interesting. People say that the reason why Amazon got big was because they put an A in front of the name. So Amazon, first result. Again, commercial and financial resources. Buying books and music. First result, Amazon. Second result, Barnes and Nobles. Third result, Borders. BBO Find. So I guess this kind of lends credibility to that theory that the reason why people started to use Amazon was because it was the first one listed in whatever catalog that was listed in. So here's a section about buying cars. Here's a section about buying tickets. So again, a lot of these sites are probably offline. They don't really work anymore. But yeah. So yeah, I like this book. It's pretty nice. The whole internet, this gives you a really good breakdown of the basic technologies on the net. And even now, like 20 years later, it's still fairly reliable. It's fairly, you know, like I can open this up and just go to any page and kind of like read about a concept that's still relevant today. So yeah, really like this book. And yeah, it really shows you that the way that books were written back in the day were, kind of made to last. They didn't go into a lot of the technologies that were just, fads at the time, I guess, other than Palm Pilot, but, that's fine. So yeah, if you like this video, thanks, and I'll see you later.